The morning mist clung to the French countryside like a shroud as dawn broke over Aracourt on September 19, 1944. Through this ghostly veil, the massive forms of German Panthers prowled forward, their crews confident in their superiority. These were the pride of the 113th Panzer Brigade, 44 tons of steel and fury commanded by Colonel Erich von Sendorf, advancing with the methodical precision that had conquered most of Europe. But hidden in the fog waited something the Wehrmacht had never encountered before: American ingenuity wrapped in 17 tons of speed and audacity. At precisely 06:20 hours, the morning silence shattered. From the mist came a sound that chilled German blood, a high-pitched whine like aircraft engines, impossibly close to the ground. Low silhouettes materialized from nowhere, spat fire, and vanished before German gunners could even traverse their turrets. In less than 20 seconds, 3 Panthers were burning hulks. The crews who survived spoke of phantoms that moved like nothing in their recognition manuals, vehicles that defied every assumption about armored warfare. They had just met the M18 Hellcat, and the rules of tank combat were about to be rewritten in blood and steel. The mathematics were brutal and elegant. While a Panther's turret labored through its 60-second rotation, dependent on engine speed and mechanical strain, the Hellcat's hydraulic system maintained a steady 15 degrees per second regardless of conditions. At 55 miles per hour, a speed that seemed impossible for a tracked vehicle, an M18 could traverse 400 meters before a Tiger tank could complete a 90-degree turn. Speed had become armor, mobility had become lethality, and the Americans had built a predator that hunted the hunters. This revolutionary concept had been born in the desperate days following Pearl Harbor, when Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Davis Bruce stood before classified briefings that detailed the Wehrmacht's terrifying success. Poland in 35 days, France in 6 weeks, the world's greatest armies crushed by mobility and concentration. Bruce, a cavalryman who understood the value of speed and maneuver, proposed something radical. Instead of matching German tanks ton for ton, America would build something that hunted them like cavalry once hunted infantry, through speed, surprise, and superior mobility. The tank destroyer force would live by a simple creed: seek, strike, destroy. The specifications evolved rapidly through 1942 as American industry geared for war, initially calling for a 37mm gun, then 57mm, then 75mm. The requirements finally settled on the potent 76mm cannon. By April 1943, Buick's prototype demonstrated speeds that seemed impossible for anything on tracks. German intelligence, when they learned of American tank destroyer development, dismissed it as typical American naivety. Wehrmacht doctrine, proven in 4 years of victorious combat, taught that effective tank destroyers required massive armor and powerful guns like their 88mm armed Jag Panthers weighing 46 tons. The idea that Americans would build a 17-ton vehicle with armor no thicker than 25mm seemed militarily absurd. The first hint of what was coming arrived during the Anzio breakout in May 1944. The German Panzer Division encountered their first M18s during fighting around the beachhead, and their combat reports spoke of vehicles that moved at estimated speeds of 70 to 80 kilometers per hour. 2 Panzer IVs were destroyed before the enemy vehicle withdrew, with return fire proving ineffective due to the target's rapid movement. German crews reported low-profile vehicles racing across the battlefield at speeds they associated with wheeled reconnaissance cars, not tracked vehicles carrying 76mm guns. These reports reached Berlin, where they were filed as unconfirmed and likely exaggerated. The German High Command believed experienced crews were overestimating enemy capabilities under combat stress. September 1944 brought the full, devastating revelation. The U.S. Third Army's advance through Lorraine had stretched German defensive lines to the breaking point, and Hitler personally ordered a counteroffensive to recapture Nancy and destroy Patton's spirit. General Hasso-Manteuffel assembled the 5th Panzer Army's best available units, the newly formed 111th and 113th Panzer brigades equipped with factory-fresh Panthers. Against them, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had positioned their M18s around Aracourt, and Lieutenant Edwin Leeper's platoon prepared to demonstrate the true meaning of American innovation. As dawn broke through heavy fog, The German attack developed with textbook precision. Then Lieutenant Leeper's platoon struck with devastating effect, engaging enemy armor at ranges of 400 to 800 yards. Employing shoot and scoot tactics, they destroyed 15 enemy tanks in approximately 30 minutes of combat. Sergeant Henry R. Hartmann's M18, positioned on the platoon's flank, achieved extraordinary success as his gunner knocked out 6 Panthers in rapid succession, each time displacing to a new firing position before German tanks could return fire. Hartmann would later receive the Distinguished Service Cross for actions that epitomized the Hellcat's lethal philosophy. The 113th Panzer Brigade's losses were catastrophic. German divisional records recorded the engagement with clinical precision. Brigade engaged enemy tank destroyers vicinity Aracourt. Enemy vehicles demonstrated unprecedented mobility. Estimated speed 80+ kilometers per hour. Losses: 39 tanks destroyed, 11 damaged. Enemy losses estimated 3 to 4 vehicles. When German forces finally captured an intact M18 near Metz in November 1944, Wehrmacht weapons testing officers conducted a thorough examination that challenged every assumption about tank destroyer design. Their technical report revealed specifications that seemed to mock German engineering philosophy. The M18 weighed 17.7 metric tons versus the Panther's 44.8 tons. Achieved a maximum speed of 88.5 kilometers per hour compared to the Panther's 46, and mounted a Wright R-975 C4 radial engine producing 400 horsepower for a power-to-weight ratio of 22.6 horsepower per ton, far superior to the Panther's 15.6 or the Tiger's 12.8. The turret could traverse 360 degrees in just 24 seconds, hydraulically powered and independent of engine speed. The armor protection was deliberately minimal, 25 mm maximum on the turret front, 13 mm on the hull sides, but this was thanks to its revolutionary design philosophy. The German report concluded with grudging respect. Vehicle achieves performance through extreme design philosophy. Armor protection sacrificed for mobility. Engine is aircraft type, air-cooled radial. Automatic transmission eliminates clutching, permitting driver to concentrate on maneuvering. Combat effectiveness depends entirely on mobility and crew training. They had finally understood what American engineers had created, not a tank destroyer in the traditional sense, but something entirely new, a predator built for a different kind of warfare. The mathematics of the M18's advantage were irrefutable and terrifying to German crews. While their turret traverse speeds varied dramatically with engine RPM, Tiger I managing 6 to 19 degrees per second, Panther early models crawling at 6 degrees per second for a full 60-second rotation. The M18's hydraulic traverse maintained 15 degrees per second regardless of engine speed. This consistency proved critical when engaging multiple targets or tracking fast-moving enemies. At its top speed of 55 miles per hour, an M18 could travel 400 meters in 16 seconds, 800 meters in 33 seconds, and cross a 1,000-meter killing field in 41 seconds. A Panther needed 30 to 60 seconds just to complete a 180-degree turret traverse when tracking a moving target at varying speeds. The M18's employment revolutionized American anti-tank tactics, with the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion's combat manual specifying a doctrine that emphasized mobility over direct firepower exchange. The recommended engagement sequence became gospel. Fire 3 to 5 rounds from a concealed position, immediately displace a minimum of 200 yards, re-engage from a new position at a different angle, and never remain stationary longer than 60 seconds when under enemy observation. This shoot and scoot doctrine proved devastatingly effective against German tank crews trained for methodical, deliberate engagements at long range who couldn't adapt to opponents who refused stand-up fights. The German Ardennes offensive of December 1944, Hitler's last desperate gamble, provided the ultimate test of the M18's revolutionary capabilities. As the 2nd Panzer Division spearheaded the drive toward Antwerp, they approached the crucial crossroads at Nauville, held by Team de Sabry and elements of the 101st Airborne Division. 4 M18s from the 609th and 705th Tank Destroyer Battalions faced overwhelming odds, but the morning fog that had helped conceal German movements now became the Hellcat's greatest ally. The combat report from the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion recorded their extraordinary achievement. 4 M18s engaged elements of 2nd Panzer Division in fog conditions, using high-speed displacement between firing positions to create impression of larger defensive force. Confirmed destroyed 24 enemy tanks. M18 losses, 1 vehicle to artillery. The Hellcats' tactics were elegantly simple but devastatingly effective. They would fire 2 or 3 rounds, then immediately reverse at full speed into the fog. By the time German tanks traversed their turrets toward the muzzle flashes, the M18s had relocated 200 to 300 yards and were engaging from a completely different angle. The 2nd Panzer Division's war diary recorded their frustration. Encountered strong tank destroyer resistance at Naval, enemy vehicles of high mobility operating in fog, unable to effectively engage due to rapid displacement of targets. Attack suspended pending reinforcement. This 48-hour delay proved critical, allowing the 101st Airborne to strengthen Bastion's defenses and ultimately hold the vital crossroads that helped doom Hitler's last offensive. By November 1944, German commanders were desperately attempting to develop tactics to counter the M18 threat. General Hasso-Manteuffel issued tactical guidance to 5th Panzer Army that revealed their growing desperation. Enemy M18 tank destroyers confirmed capable of 80+ km/h road speed, 40+ km/h cross-country. Standard engagement procedures must be modified. Do not attempt to track moving M18 with turret traverse. Preposition turrets on likely displacement routes. Employ infantry with Panzerfaust on flanks. Use artillery to suppress suspected positions. Avoid pursuit. M18s will always outrun our vehicles, but these adaptations proved largely ineffective. The M18's speed advantage was simply too great, and German crews couldn't overcome years of training that emphasized deliberate, precise gunnery over rapid response. The doctrinal rigidity that had served them well in earlier campaigns became a fatal weakness against an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. German tank training had emphasized deliberate long-range gunnery, with crews spending years perfecting precise shooting techniques that proved useless against rapidly displacing targets. The Buick Motor Division manufactured 2,507 M18s between July 1943 and October 1944, with production peaking at 267 units in November 1943. The original contract called for 8,986 vehicles, but this was reduced as the war's end approached and tank destroyer doctrine evolved. Each M18 cost $55,230 in 1943, relatively expensive due to the specialized engine and transmission, but still mass-producible using American automotive industry techniques. By contrast, a German Panther cost approximately 117,100 Reichsmarks and required significantly more production time due to its complex final drive and transmission systems. The M18 was designed for mass production from the start, incorporating the Wright R-975 radial engine already in production for aircraft and other vehicles. The torquematic transmission eliminated complex driver training requirements, while the open-top turret simplified manufacturing. Standard automotive components were used wherever possible, reflecting American industrial philosophy that prioritized quantity and reliability over individual unit perfection. The Tank Destroyer Training Center at Camp Hood, Texas, developed specialized programs for M18 crews that emphasized skills dramatically different from conventional tank operations. Driver training focused on high-speed maneuvering, rapid acceleration and braking, and terrain exploitation. Drivers learned to maintain maximum speed while providing stable gun platforms during brief halts, a skill that required exceptional coordination and nerve. Gunner training emphasized rapid target acquisition and firing on the move, with M18 gunners learning to fire quickly at moderate ranges, accepting lower first-round hit probability in exchange for rapid engagement capability. Commander training stressed battlefield awareness, rapid decision-making, and coordination with other M18s. Commanders learned to think 3 moves ahead, always planning their next 2 firing positions before engaging their current target. The psychological profile for M18 crews differed dramatically from heavy tank crews, with recruiters seeking men comfortable with risk, able to make instant decisions, and who preferred agility over the psychological comfort of heavy armor. The M18's greatest weakness was obvious and deadly: its paper-thin armor. With maximum protection of 25 mm on the turret front and just 13 mm on the hull sides, the vehicle was vulnerable to almost every German anti-tank weapon. 20 mm anti-aircraft guns could penetrate at close range, 37 mm anti-tank guns could kill at any range, and Panzerfaust infantry weapons, artillery fragments, even heavy machine gun fire could prove lethal on side armor. This vulnerability shaped every aspect of M18 employment, with standard operating procedures emphasizing never remaining stationary under enemy observation, avoiding urban combat where speed was negated, maintaining minimum 500-meter standoff from enemy infantry, and using terrain masking continuously. M18 crews developed an almost supernatural awareness of their surroundings, constantly scanning for threats and escape routes. They lived in a world where survival depended entirely on speed, situational awareness, and the ability to strike and vanish before the enemy could respond. It was warfare stripped to its essential elements: see first, shoot first, move first, or die. By war's end, M18-equipped tank destroyer battalions had compiled impressive but sobering records. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion claimed 106 enemy tanks, the 603rd claimed 92, the 609th claimed 67, the 705th claimed 89, and the 85th claimed 51. Overall statistics showed 540 M18s at maximum strength in March 1945, with combat losses of 216 vehicles for a kill-to-loss ratio of 2.3 to 1 in Europe. The average engagement range was 650 meters, with engagements lasting an average of 2.3 minutes. While the 2.3 to 1 kill ratio was respectable, it fell short of pre-war expectations. More significantly, M18s spend approximately 70% of their combat time in infantry support roles rather than hunting tanks. The tank destroyer doctrine's fundamental assumption of massed enemy armor attacks proved largely incorrect, as German forces increasingly operated in dispersed, defensive configurations that limited opportunities for the massive tank battles American planners had envisioned. The Italian campaign presented different challenges that nonetheless demonstrated the M18's versatility. The 85th Tank Destroyer Battalion, operating M18s in mountainous terrain, discovered that even in restrictive terrain, the Hellcat's mobility provided significant advantages. The vehicles could rapidly redeploy between threatened sectors using mountain roads where heavier vehicles struggled, and during the Gothic line battles, M18s would race to commanding heights, engage German vehicles in valleys below, then relocate before counter-battery fire arrived. German forces in Italy, accustomed to generally ponderous Allied movements in difficult terrain, were repeatedly surprised by M18 response times. A German corps-level report noted with frustration, enemy tank destroyers demonstrate ability to concentrate rapidly at threatened points. Speed of redeployment prevents effective counter-battery fire. The 637th Tank Destroyer Battalion brought M18s to the Pacific, participating in the Philippines campaign where, against minimal Japanese armor, the vehicles served primarily in bunker busting and infantry support roles. The open turret proved nearly fatal against Japanese infantry tactics, forcing crews to weld improvised overhead cover and chicken wire screens to defend against grenades and satchel charges. The vehicle's speed allowed rapid response to Japanese infiltration attempts, but jungle terrain often negated mobility advantages, forcing crews to adapt their tactics to an environment that neutralized their primary advantage. The M18 incorporated several revolutionary features that would influence armored vehicle design for decades. The torquematic transmission, developed by General Motors, eliminated manual clutching with 3 forward speeds that shifted automatically based on speed and load, allowing drivers to concentrate entirely on maneuvering rather than gear selection, critical at high speeds where split-second decisions meant survival. The torsion bar suspension provided 14 inches of will travel, allowing sustained high-speed movement over rough terrain with long suspension travel that absorbed impacts which would have damaged leaf-spring vehicles. The Wright R-975 radial engine, a 9-cylinder air-cooled aircraft power plant, provided exceptional power-to-weight ratio. Early C1 models produced 350 horsepower, while later C4 versions generated 400 horsepower, with air cooling eliminating vulnerable radiators and coolant systems that could be disabled by small arms fire. The hydraulic turret traverse, powered by an electric motor driving a hydraulic pump, provided consistent 15 degree per second traverse regardless of engine speed or vehicle movement, a critical advantage over German manual traverse systems that degraded with engine performance. The M18's combat record profoundly influenced post-war armored vehicle development. While the tank destroyer doctrine itself was abandoned and the tank destroyer force disbanded in November 1945, the Hellcat's demonstration that mobility could substitute for armor resonated globally. The Soviet Union developed the PT-76 light amphibious tank and later BMP infantry fighting vehicle emphasizing mobility. Britain created the Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Tracked series, prioritizing speed for reconnaissance. France built the AMX-13 with automatic loader to reduce weight, and Germany's Leopard 1 abandoned heavy armor for mobility in a complete reversal of World War II philosophy. Modern wheeled tank destroyers like the Italian Centauro, Japanese Type 16, and American M1128 mobile gun system represent the M18's conceptual descendants, accepting vulnerability for strategic and tactical mobility. The question that haunted German commanders throughout the war was why their forces, renowned for tactical innovation, could never effectively counter the M18 threat. Several factors contributed to this failure, beginning with doctrinal rigidity that emphasized deliberate long-range gunnery over rapid response. Technical limitations compounded the problem, as German turret traverse systems dependent on engine RPM simply couldn't match the M18's consistent hydraulic traverse. At idle or low engine speeds, German tanks were virtually helpless against flanking M18s. The psychological shock of suddenly becoming prey rather than predator cannot be underestimated. German tankers had operated with impunity against most Allied armor, and the psychological impact of facing an opponent that could strike and vanish at will proved devastating to morale and tactical confidence. Communication breakdown further hampered German responses, as their tactical radios, already stressed by Allied jamming, couldn't coordinate responses to rapidly moving M18s operating in coordinated platoons. In post-war interviews conducted by the U.S. Army's Military History Institute, M18 veterans consistently emphasized speed as their primary survival tool, with their testimonies revealing the psychological warfare inherent in their tactics. Staff Sergeant Vernon Miller of the 85th Tank Destroyer Battalion summarized their philosophy. "We lived by 3 rules. Shoot fast, move fast, think fast. If you did all 3, you went home. If you failed at any one, you didn't." Technical Sergeant John Patterson of the 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion was more blunt. The Hellcat wasn't about fair fights. It was about unfair fights in our favor. We'd hit them where they didn't expect, when they didn't expect, and be gone before they knew what happened. Private First Class Robert Chen of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion captured the existential reality of Hellcat service. "Every time I climbed into our M18, I knew I was sitting in a tin can, but it was a tin can that could run 55 miles per hour. That speed saved my life more times than any armor could have." These testimonies reveal men who understood they were fighting a different kind of war, where survival depended not on withstanding enemy fire, but on never being where that fire landed. The M18's combat statistics tell a complex story that reveals both remarkable achievements and sobering realities. Mobility metrics showed top speed of 55 miles per hour on roads, cross-country speed of 26 miles per hour, acceleration of 0 to 30 miles per hour in 11 seconds, range of 150 miles on 75 gallons of fuel, and ground pressure of 10.5 pounds per square inch, lighter than many trucks. Combat performance statistics revealed average kills per vehicle of 2. For enemy tanks, average survival time in combat of 67 days, mechanical reliability of 200 miles between major maintenance, and crew survival rate when vehicle was destroyed of 73%. These statistics reveal both the vehicle's strengths and its fundamental limitations. The high crew survival rate reflected the vehicle's speed advantage. Crews could often escape even when their M18 was hit. The relatively short combat survival time confirmed the vulnerability of thin armor, while the mechanical reliability demonstrated the soundness of using proven automotive components rather than complex, specialized systems. The M18 Hellcat's influence extends beyond specific vehicles to fundamental concepts in modern warfare. The emphasis on sensor-to-shooter time in modern combat is conceptually similar to the M18's shoot-and-scoot tactics, prioritizing rapid target engagement over prolonged firepower exchanges. Today's active protection systems represent technology attempting to replicate what the M18 achieved through speed, avoiding hits rather than absorbing them. The M18 platoons coordinating rapid attacks from multiple directions presaged modern networked combat operations, while their demonstration that technological superiority doesn't require matching enemy capabilities, but rather negating them established principles of asymmetric response that influence military thinking today. The M18 Hellcat stands as one of World War II's most innovative combat vehicles, born from American industrial capability and tactical creativity that challenged fundamental assumptions about armored warfare. German tankers trained to dominate through superior armor and firepower discovered that American innovation meant changing the rules of engagement entirely. The Hellcat's 55-mile-per-hour top speed wasn't just a technical specification. It was a paradigm shift that German tactical doctrine couldn't accommodate. The M18 proved that in warfare, as in nature, survival doesn't always favor the strongest or the most heavily armed. Sometimes it favors the fastest, the most agile, the most adaptable. German tank crews, watching their carefully aimed shots miss rapidly disappearing M18s, learned this lesson repeatedly in the killing fields of France, the frozen forests of the Ardennes, and the final battles in Germany itself. They faced an enemy that refused to fight on their terms, that turned their strengths into weaknesses, that struck and vanished like phantoms in the fog. Today, when military historians analyze the M18 Hellcat, they see more than just a successful tank destroyer. They see American military innovation at its most creative, identifying enemy strengths and systematically negating them through unconventional means. The German tankers never knew the American Hellcat could reach 55 miles per hour until they faced it in combat. That technological surprise, combined with tactical innovation and crew training, created a weapon system that transcended its mechanical specifications. In the end, the M18 Hellcat rewrote the mathematics of armored combat. It proved that protection didn't require armor, that lethality didn't require the biggest gun, and that battlefield dominance could be achieved through mobility rather than mass. At 55 miles per hour, it outran not just German tanks, but German military doctrine itself. The ghosts of M18s still haunt modern military thinking. Every time a military planner chooses mobility over protection, every time a commander emphasizes speed of action over deliberate preparation, every time a weapons designer accepts vulnerability to achieve performance, the Hellcat's lesson echoes through the decades. Sometimes the best armor is not being where the enemy shoots. German tankers of the 113th Panzer Brigade, the 2nd Panzer Division, and dozens of other units learned this lesson in blood and fire. They learned that American innovation didn't mean building better tanks. It meant building something entirely different, something that moved too fast for their tactics, their training, and their turrets to counter. The M18 Hellcat, 55 miles per hour of American audacity, remains proof that in warfare, speed can be the ultimate weapon. German tankers never knew the American Hellcat could reach such speeds. By the time they learned, it was already too late. The war was lost not just on the battlefield, but in the realm of imagination, where American engineers dared to trade armor for velocity, creating a predator that hunted the hunters and proved that sometimes the most revolutionary weapon is the one that refuses to play by the enemy's rules.